So a question and answer video today. I will not read the entire question because kind of digresses on different topics, but it gets down to something like what changes between Soviet and Western school training. Also, I got this private message. Some aspect of it I don't fully understand because the grammar doesn't make sense. In any case, like speaking of school training, I mean Soviet and Western school training. Now, as it has been asked, it's not a question that can be answered per se. So I tried to give it a different shape, hoping to correctly interpret the user's intentions. Because if I understand correctly, in reality, the question is not historical, right? In the sense that the Soviet school does not mean the training of the Warsaw Pact, but the current one, right? And therefore concerns the training of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. The second part of the comparison, Western training, would also require further study because each Western nation has its own military school, its own doctrine, and its own training methodologies. There are even differences in training between the corps of the same nation, as well as obviously between the arms. In this regard, the integration between NATO members and the joint maneuvers also have the purpose of developing qualitative levels that are not homologous but compatible. We explained this in the video about the NATO, in the general structure of the same NATO, in fact, which is substantially characterized by complementarity slash specialization, dialogue, and sharing of experiences, access to materials and means, unity of command. It was in some way a forced choice by the democratic character of Western nations, which involved the effort to maximize the benefits deriving from the dialogue between different military cultures. To illustrate, Canada and Belgium have military schools of absolute excellence. It would not have made sense to reset them, to supplant them with a single structure, of course. The third point that should be explored is a definition of training, since let's say I would need to explain this because never made a video about training, let's say, but we will see it at some point. But at this point, the question really becomes, can the overall quality of training be measured, right? In theoretical terms, the answer identifies some precise parameters. Training is a function of variables such as resources, human material, experience in the field, wealth of knowledge, forecasts of operational use, technological level, so all mixed within the dynamics between political institutions and military institutions. So finally we get to the point. Now, the war in Afghanistan and Chechnya have already shown the weakness of the Red Army first and then of its heir. But only in 2009 the Russian leadership was able to initiate a reform that was considered the most radical since the times of the Tsars. And the unsatisfactory performance of the Russian armed forces in the war with Georgia had made a revision of the outdated Soviet structure with its waste, its corruption, its elephantine bureaucratic apparatus, its enormous and disproportionate officer class, its inadequate conformation of mass army, unpostponable, right? So the Russian economy could no longer afford that level of spending on such an inefficient military instrument. Now, the war in Ukraine is going on, and and it will keep going on, and so we will see a lot of things, but fundamentally the picture in the bigger frame is quite clear, right? The contour of such reform at this point, 13 years later, we're not yet perfectly clear. Not even the doctrine is, right? But substantially the most shared conclusion is that the Russian armed forces train, as we are seeing, to fight limited wars of restricted theaters, such as, in fact, that against Ukraine and the other former allies of the Warsaw Pact, and therefore wars characterized by the concentration of an efficient critical mass enjoying overwhelming local superiority. An instrument, therefore, of an aggressive medium-long-term policy of reappropriation of a sphere of influence lost with the fall of the Berlin Wall, and of all the buffer states with the West, and on the contrary, the let's say, let's call them Western forces, have and cultivate a multi-theater projection. Therefore, they train and enjoy all the means to do so, potentially to fight as a coalition in every latitude, in every terrain, sea and sky of the world. The wars waged by NATO members on various theaters are lessons learned that substantially influence training, providing indispensable knowledge that Russia does not enjoy. And these are the current differences. And so, what about the perspective? Well, with the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact, NATO, and even just the EU has an immense advantage over Russia in all the aforementioned training parameters, and in the future they are even potentially even greater for strategic reasons, such as the dramatic aging of the Russian population, the growing technological gap, in fact the possible rearmament of Germany and or strategic partners such as Japan, factually. So the British SAS are the best special forces in the world because they excel in all the parameters considered and have fought in Belfast, in the desert, and in every type of intermediate terrain. They move in urban environments better than the SWATs, but have also learned to survive weeks by eating spiders and drinking rattlesnake blood. Not because Boudica's descendants are more combative than those of the Vatican City, but just by sheer experience learned. Well, all of this is basically unattainable by Russia by any standard. And this is basically what it gets down to. And then we're talking about training in a narrow sense, let's say, in the broader doctrinal environment, and generally speaking, the subordination of the military instrument to the political one. So naturally, from 2022 onwards, we will see a lot of things changing in the world. And we will be able to measure, in fact, this and fully appreciate. We've already seen essentially right now. You just look at American logistics. I mean that's terrifying, right? If they are achieving something that was that is just by scale irreplicable in many ways. And this is okay. We will keep talking about the stuff that I wanted to keep this video short, frankly, but. It's important to stress properly the gap existing between these kind of schools of training, right? And in practice also the difference is always made by the armed forces for how they are not just trained, but how they are simply supplied, commanded, and especially motivated, right? That is something that every student of Clausewitz in theory knows pretty damn well. So that's another field. I'm not talking about this today. I just hope I answered the question, if I understood it correctly. And for now, I'll stop it here. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please share it. Otherwise, leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my upcoming content. And for now, thank you heartily for listening to me. I wish you a nice time and see you next time. Bye.